The rain had been falling steadily for hours, turning the streets into shiny rivers of reflections. Streetlights glimmered on the wet pavement, and car tires made soft splashing sounds as they drove through small puddles. Aisha was driving home from work, her mind tired but her heart calm. The office had been a long day, full of meetings and paperwork, but the quiet drive in the rain always gave her a little peace. She loved these moments when she could just think, with no one around to interrupt her. As she turned a familiar corner, her eyes caught a figure standing at the side of the road. At first, she thought it was just another pedestrian trying to cross in the rain. But then she noticed the old man's posture. He wasn't moving much, just standing there under a small tattered umbrella, shivering. His coat looked thin and his shoes were soaked. Something about the way he stood there alone in the cold and rain tugged at her heart. Aisha slowed down and glanced at him through her windshield. The man raised a hand slightly as if signaling for help. Without really thinking about it, she pressed the brakes and pulled over. The tires hissed softly on the wet asphalt as she stopped. "Do you need a ride?" she asked as she rolled down the window. The man hesitated. He looked around nervously, his eyes flicking from the wet streets to the passing cars. His face was lined with age, wrinkles telling stories of a life she could only imagine. Finally, he nodded. Yes, thank you," he said in a quiet, raspy voice. Aisha unlocked the passenger door, and he climbed in slowly, carefully closing the umbrella so it wouldn't drip all over the car. As he settled into the seat, she noticed the slight tremble in his hands. It wasn't just the cold. There was something fragile about him, a kind of loneliness that went deeper than the rain or the night. "I'm Aisha," she said warmly, trying to make the situation comfortable. "I don't mind giving you a ride anywhere you need to go." The man smiled faintly, a small, polite smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Thank you. I'm Mr. Thompson," he said. I just need to get a little further down the road." Aisha nodded, gently pressing on the accelerator as they merged back into the street. The car's heater hummed softly, and the smell of rain mixed with the faint scent of her perfume filled the small space. She glanced at him from the corner of her eye, trying to start a conversation. "Do you live around here?" she asked. He shook his head. "Not really. I'm visiting someone." His voice was quiet, almost hesitant, and there was a pause before he added, "It's complicated." Aisha didn't press further. Sometimes people just needed silence, she thought. Sometimes kindness didn't have to include questions. She let the car glide through the rain-slicked streets, listening to the soft tapping of raindrops on the windshield. After a few minutes of quiet, she decided to try again, hoping to ease some of the tension. "It's a rainy night," she said lightly. "Not the best weather to be walking." He nodded. "Yeah, it's been a long time since I've been out in the rain like this." His voice had a hint of sadness, and Aisha noticed how he stared out the window at the city lights reflecting in puddles. There was something about the way he looked that made her want to know his story, but she didn't want to push. The drive continued, and slowly, a kind of quiet connection formed between them. It wasn't words or stories yet. It was just the shared human experience of a rainy night, a warm car, and two strangers crossing paths. Aisha tried to imagine his life. How had he ended up standing alone in the rain? Did he have family, friends? Was he always this lonely, or had something happened recently? She didn't want to make assumptions, but her heart felt heavy for him. Suddenly, he spoke again, almost as if reading her thoughts. I don't often ask for help," he said. His eyes finally met hers for a brief moment. People usually just pass by. They don't notice." Aisha's heart clenched a little. "Well, I noticed," she said softly. "And I don't mind helping." He smiled faintly again, this time a little more genuine. There was a moment of silence after that, comfortable and quiet. The car moved through the streets, past closed shops and darkened buildings. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, leaving droplets on the windows that reflected the city lights like tiny, trembling stars. "You're very kind," he said quietly after a while. "It's rare to meet someone like you." Aisha shook her head lightly, trying to brush off the compliment. "I don't know about that," she said. "I just try to do what I can. Everyone has hard days. Maybe I'm just trying to make someone's day a little better." He nodded as if understanding more than she realized. Then he became quiet again, staring out the window at the wet streets. Aisha didn't interrupt. She knew that sometimes people didn't want to speak. Sometimes just having someone there was enough. As the car approached a part of town she didn't recognize well, Aisha felt a small twinge of unease. The streets were narrower, darker, and less familiar. She considered asking where exactly he needed to go, but then thought better of it. She trusted him, and there was no reason to doubt a man who seemed fragile and in need. Finally he spoke, his voice low and hesitant. Could you take me a little further down this road?" "Of course," she said, turning the wheel carefully as the rain created slick patches on the asphalt. "Just tell me when to stop." There was a pause, and then he added almost reluctantly, "I need to stop near an old building." It's not much, but it's safe for the night," Aisha nodded. She didn't know what kind of place he was talking about, but she trusted her instincts and followed his directions. As the car moved forward, she couldn't help but feel a strange mix of concern and curiosity. Who was this man, really? Why was he out here alone in the rain? The streets grew quieter, the city lights dimmer. The puddles reflected the faint glow of street lamps, creating a soft, eerie glow around the car. Aisha glanced at Mr. Thompson, who seemed smaller in the dim light, hunched slightly as if carrying an invisible weight. There was a sadness in him that went beyond the rainy night, something deep and invisible, and Aisha felt a pang of empathy. She didn't know what awaited them at the old building, and part of her felt a flutter of worry. But she also felt certain that she couldn't turn back. She had seen him, and she had offered to help. And now she would see it through no matter what. As they drove silently, the rain slowing to a fine mist, the night seemed to stretch on endlessly. Every turn of the wheel, every drop of water on the windshield, seemed to echo the quiet tension in the car. Aisha's mind wandered to thoughts of how a single choice, slowing down to offer a ride, could change everything. She had expected nothing more than a short drive and a polite thank you, but now, the air between them was heavy with unspoken questions and unseen dangers. Mr. Thompson adjusted his coat and stared out the window again, lost in thought. Aisha felt a deep respect for him, sensing the life he had lived, the hardships he had faced, and the loneliness that had become part of his existence. She didn't know his story, but she knew enough to understand that this ride meant more than just transportation. It was a rare gesture of human connection, a moment of care that he had likely not experienced in years. The car moved slowly along the narrow street leading to the old building he had mentioned. Aisha's pulse quickened slightly, not with fear but with anticipation of what might come next. The night held uncertainty but also possibility, and in that moment she realized something simple and profound. Sometimes, offering help is not about knowing the outcome, but about choosing to act with kindness anyway. And with that thought, she kept driving, determined to see the ride through, unaware of the challenges and surprises that awaited her just around the corner. Aisha's heart beat a little faster as she followed the old man's directions through streets she barely recognized. The city felt different here, quieter, almost abandoned in some places, with broken streetlights and darkened windows giving the streets a deserted look. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had entered another world, one far removed from the busy city she had driven through earlier. "Are you sure this is the right place?" she asked cautiously, keeping her eyes on the road. Mr. Thompson's voice was soft but firm. "Yes, I just need to stop here. It's close." He paused, adjusting his coat around his shoulders as if preparing himself for something. "It's not much, but it's safe for now." Aisha nodded, though a small knot of worry formed in her stomach. She wasn't used to driving into areas that felt so deserted and unsafe, especially at night. Something about the way the buildings loomed around them, dark and quiet, made her instincts tingle, but she couldn't turn back. She had promised him a ride, and she intended to keep that promise. As they approached the old building, Aisha could see that it was worn and abandoned looking. The paint was chipped, windows were dark, and some were even cracked. The front door seemed fragile, hanging slightly off its hinges. Aisha's unease grew, but she kept the car steady, pulling up slowly to the curb. "Here," Mr. Thompson said quietly, glancing at the building nervously. "This is where I need to be. Just stay here for a moment." Aisha didn't move immediately. She studied him carefully, noticing the hesitation in his movements, the way his eyes darted toward the shadows around the building. There was something in his expression that made her pause, a mix of fear and caution that didn't match the frailty she had seen in him before. "Are you sure you'll be okay?" she asked gently, her voice low so as not to startle him. He nodded slowly, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. I'll be fine. Just It's complicated. Please don't worry about me. Aisha bit her lip, her mind racing. She wanted to help him more, to ask questions and understand, but something in his tone told her that pressing further might upset him. She didn't know what he meant by complicated, but she could sense that there was a story he wasn't ready to tell yet. Just as she was about to speak again, movement caught her eye. A group of men emerged from the shadows near the building. Aisha's heart skipped a beat. They looked rough, with hard faces and an intimidating presence. They weren't just passers-by. They were watching her, and her instincts screamed that they weren't friendly. Before she could react, one of the men stepped forward, blocking the car. Another came up to the passenger side, and a third lingered near the building entrance. Aisha's grip tightened on the steering wheel. The air felt heavier suddenly, charged with tension she hadn't expected. "Stay calm," Mr. Thompson whispered, leaning slightly toward her. "It's okay. It's okay." Aisha looked at him confused. "How is this okay? Who are they?" They are old friends," he said hesitantly, his voice trembling slightly. "People I used to know. A long time ago. Things didn't end well." Aisha felt a chill run down her spine. Something about the way he said it made her uneasy. She hadn't expected danger tonight. She had only wanted to help. But now it seemed that her simple act of kindness had led them straight into a situation far more serious than she could have imagined. One of the men leaned closer to the car, his voice rough. "Evening, old man," he said, looking directly at Mr. Thompson. "Didn't expect to see you around here." Mr. Thompson flinched slightly, but he remained composed. "It's just a ride," he said quietly. "I'm not looking for trouble." Aisha's pulse quickened. She could see bruises on his hands, marks of some past conflict. It was clear that these men had a history with him, and it wasn't good. Her mind raced, thinking of ways to get out safely, but she also realized she couldn't just leave him here. Something inside her told her that running could make things worse. The men seemed to hesitate, exchanging quick glances among themselves. Mr. Thompson whispered something to them, almost inaudibly. Aisha couldn't hear the words, but their expressions shifted. The tension didn't disappear, but there was a brief pause, long enough for her to think clearly again. She realized then that the old man wasn't as powerless as he seemed. There was a familiarity in the way they reacted to him, a respect or fear that only came from history. She could see it in the way they looked at him, and it made her heart ache. This man, who seemed fragile and alone, carried a past filled with struggles and dangerous encounters. Aisha took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "Mr. Thompson, maybe we should just go," she said quietly, hoping he would agree. He shook his head. "No, we can't, not yet. Just stay calm and don't panic. It's important that you stay in the car." Her hands tightened on the wheel, but she did as he asked. The men moved closer, their presence looming, but Mr. Thompson remained calm, though she could see the tension in his eyes. It was strange to watch him. He looked old and weak, yet there was a strength in him, a history that gave him some control over the situation. One of the men spoke again, this time more firmly. "We just want to talk," he said. "No trouble if you cooperate." Aisha's heart pounded. She realized that their intentions weren't entirely clear. She wanted to get out safely, but she also didn't want to abandon Mr. Thompson. She had stopped to help him, and now she couldn't just leave. The old man finally turned to her, his face serious. "Aisha, I need you to trust me," he said quietly. "Just stay calm and we'll get through this." She nodded, swallowing hard. There was something about his voice, steady and calm despite the danger, that reassured her. She didn't know what he had been through, but she could sense that he had faced situations like this before. The men exchanged more glances, and Aisha noticed a change in their demeanor. They didn't seem as aggressive now, more cautious, as if they were weighing their next move. Mr. Thompson whispered again, this time something she could barely hear. They nodded slowly, stepping back slightly, though their eyes never left the car. Aisha felt a small surge of relief, but she knew the situation was far from over. She kept her hands on the wheel, ready to move at the slightest sign of trouble. The rain had almost stopped, leaving a fine mist that hung in the air. The night felt heavy, each sound amplified, the distant hum of a car engine, the soft drip of water from the broken gutters, and the men's quiet murmurs. After what felt like an eternity, Mr. Thompson leaned back slightly, giving her a small nod. "It's okay. For now," he said quietly. They won't hurt us tonight, but we need to be careful. Aisha exhaled slowly, feeling a mix of fear and admiration. She had come out to help a man in the rain, expecting nothing more than a short ride and a polite thank you. Instead, she had found herself in a tense encounter with strangers, learning that this quiet, lonely man had a past filled with danger and challenges. As she kept the car running, she realized something important. Sometimes people carry invisible burdens, histories that the world doesn't see. Mr. Thompson's life had brought him to this moment, standing in the rain with strangers from his past surrounding him, and yet here he was, calm and composed enough to guide her safely through it. Aisha felt a deep respect for him. Despite his frailty, despite the loneliness and pain that clung to him like shadows, he had managed to face a difficult moment with courage. She also felt a renewed sense of purpose. Her small act of kindness had put her in a challenging situation, but she had no regrets. She knew that helping him was the right thing, no matter how complicated it had become. The men eventually stepped back further, murmuring among themselves, and Aisha realized that the worst of the immediate danger had passed. She glanced at Mr. Thompson, who gave her a faint smile, a small gesture that conveyed gratitude and reassurance. For Aisha, the night had become more than just a ride home. It was a lesson in trust, courage, and human connection. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that she would stay with him until he was truly safe. As the car idled quietly in the misty street, she could feel the tension slowly ebbing, replaced by a cautious hope. They had survived the first encounter, and she knew that the rest of the night would require patience, care, and awareness. But for now, they had each other, and that was enough to face whatever came next. Aisha kept the car running, her eyes flicking between the old building and Mr. Thompson. The night had been tense, the kind of tension that wraps itself around your chest and refuses to let go. She had expected a quiet ride and a simple act of kindness, but now she understood that the man she was helping had a life far more complicated than she had imagined. "Mr. Thompson," she said softly, trying to break the silence without startling him, "can you tell me, what exactly is going on? Who were those men?" He hesitated, his gaze fixed on the misty street ahead. His hands gripped his coat tightly, revealing the faint bruises she had noticed before. I suppose it's time you know," he said quietly. "But it's not an easy story." Aisha nodded, leaning slightly forward. She didn't want to pressure him, but she needed to understand. She could feel the weight of his past pressing down on him, and she wanted to help, even if all she could do was listen. "I've lived most of my life in this city," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "but it hasn't been kind to me. I lost my family a long time ago. My children, they don't speak to me. My wife, she left when things got hard. And after that, I was alone." Aisha listened quietly, her heart aching for him. She imagined the loneliness, the nights spent in empty rooms, the cold meals, and the absence of laughter or comfort. She couldn't begin to know how that felt, but she could feel it through his words, through the subtle pain that clung to him like a shadow. "I tried to survive," he continued. "But the city, it doesn't forgive mistakes. I ended up falling in with people I shouldn't have. At first it was small things, borrowing money, favors here and there. But over the years, it became dangerous. The men outside, they are remnants of that life. People I knew, people I trusted, and people who hold grudges." Aisha felt a chill run down her spine. She had sensed the danger earlier, but hearing the story made it real. These weren't just strangers. These were people who had been part of his life. People with history, anger, and resentment, and somehow through it all he had survived. "I don't know why I'm telling you this," he admitted, looking at her with tired eyes. Maybe because I've been alone for so long I've forgotten what it's like to trust someone. And tonight, you reminded me." Aisha's throat tightened. She had only offered him a ride, something so small in her mind, but it had meant more than she realized. To him it was a glimpse of kindness in a world that had been unkind for far too long. Just then, a noise from outside made her flinch. One of the men shifted, his movement sharp and deliberate. Aisha's heart raced. She looked at Mr. Thompson, who seemed to notice her fear but remained calm. "They won't hurt us tonight," he said softly. "Not if we stay calm and don't provoke them. But we have to be careful. They're unpredictable, and they've known me for a long time. They remember everything, old debts, old fights, old betrayals. Aisha nodded, gripping the steering wheel tightly. She didn't fully understand the intricacies of his past, but she trusted him. There was something about the way he spoke, quiet, measured, but firm, that made her believe he had faced worse and come out alive. "They're watching you too," he continued, his eyes following the shadows outside the car. "They're trying to figure out if you're a threat, if you'll interfere. You're safe if you stay here, but don't try anything stupid." "Not yet." Aisha exhaled slowly, trying to steady her nerves. She had faced difficult situations before, but nothing like this. She had never been caught in a moment where a simple act of kindness had led to danger. But even in fear, she felt a strange sense of purpose. She was here to help, and she wouldn't abandon him. "I understand," she said quietly. "I'll stay calm. I'll do whatever you need." He gave her a faint smile, a small gesture that carried a lot of gratitude. "Thank you," he said. "It's rare to meet someone willing to help without expecting anything in return. You remind me that people can still be good." Aisha felt warmth in her chest at his words. It was strange to hear such honesty from a stranger, someone who had been through so much. And yet, she realized that his gratitude wasn't just for her presence. It was for the reminder that the world could still be compassionate, even after years of hardship. Minutes passed in tense silence. The men outside seemed to linger, their shadows stretching across the building's cracked walls. Aisha could hear soft murmurs and the shuffle of feet, but no aggressive movements. She realized they were waiting, calculating, and that made the situation all the more dangerous. "I need to tell you something else," Mr. Thompson said suddenly, breaking the quiet. His voice was barely audible, but it carried weight. "I haven't always been completely honest. I wasn't just a victim in this. I made mistakes too. Choices that hurt people. Choices that brought me here tonight." Aisha's mind raced. She had assumed he was only vulnerable, only lonely, only trying to survive. But now she understood that his life was complex, a mixture of hardship and error, of misfortune and regret. And yet, despite everything, he had survived. That resilience, she realized, was part of what made him human. "I don't judge you," she said softly. "Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone has things they regret. What matters is what you do now, not what happened before." He nodded slowly, looking out the window at the misty street. I hope you're right," he said quietly. "Sometimes I wonder if there's any hope left. But tonight you showed me there is." The men outside shifted again, their presence a constant reminder of the danger they were in. Aisha felt a wave of fear, but also determination. She couldn't let him face this alone. She had to stay strong, calm, and ready for anything. "Stay with me," he whispered. "We'll get through this, just stay calm and trust me." Aisha nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. She wasn't just a passerby anymore. She was part of his story now, and her actions mattered. She could feel the connection between them growing, a fragile bond forged in a moment of shared fear and trust. Time seemed to stretch. The minutes crawled as they sat in the car, shadows flickering outside, the faint sound of distant traffic and the occasional drip of water from the broken gutters the only interruptions. Aisha's mind ran through possible scenarios, thinking of every way they could get out safely. But she trusted Mr. Thompson. If anyone knew how to handle this, it was him. Finally, he spoke again, his voice steady now, though still carrying a hint of fear. "I need to face them. I have to make things right, but I couldn't do it alone. Thank you for being here." Aisha felt a lump in her throat. She hadn't expected gratitude in the middle of such a tense moment, but she understood it. He wasn't thanking her for a simple ride. He was thanking her for trusting him, for staying calm, for believing in the possibility of kindness in a world that often forgot it. The men outside seemed to sense something too. Their murmurs grew quieter, less certain. Mr. Thompson adjusted his coat, took a deep breath, and stepped out of the car, leaving Aisha behind for just a moment. She watched as he approached the group, his movements cautious but purposeful. Even from inside the car, she could see the way they reacted to him: hesitation, recognition, and a strange sort of respect. He wasn't just an old, lonely man. He was someone with history, someone they knew, someone who had survived. Aisha held her breath, gripping the wheel, waiting for what might come next. She couldn't see everything, but she could feel the tension, the quiet negotiation unfolding in the night, and in that moment she realized something important. Sometimes, survival isn't just about strength or fear. It's about understanding, timing, and the courage to face the consequences of a lifetime. Minutes later, Mr. Thompson returned to the car, his face pale but calm. "It's over. For now," he said quietly. "They won't bother us tonight. But we need to move carefully from here." Aisha exhaled slowly, relief washing over her. She had expected a simple ride, a polite conversation, and a short journey. Instead, she had witnessed a small window into a life filled with struggle, mistakes, and resilience. And she realized that her presence, her willingness to help, had mattered more than she could have imagined. As they prepared to leave, Aisha felt a mix of fear, respect, and awe. She had come out to help a man in the rain and ended up learning about courage, history, and human connection. The night had revealed that even in the darkest moments, there could be understanding and trust, fragile though it might be. And as the car pulled away from the old building, the mist rising around the streetlights, Aisha knew that the story was far from over. The night had many more lessons to teach, and she was ready to face them, together with the man who had shown her that kindness and courage could still exist in the most unexpected places. Aisha's hands tightened on the steering wheel as the car slowly rolled away from the old building. The streets were quiet now, but the weight of what had just happened pressed down on her chest. She could still feel the tension lingering in the air, the invisible presence of those men and the heavy history that Mr. Thompson carried with him. Every instinct in her screamed to drive faster, to put as much distance between herself and that place as possible. But she knew better. She couldn't let panic guide her. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly, glancing at Mr. Thompson. He was sitting back in his seat, pale and tense, but his eyes met hers steadily. "I will be," he said slowly. "Thanks to you, I'm still safe. I didn't think anyone would care enough to stop to help. But you did, and that makes a difference." Aisha felt a mix of relief and pride. She had only offered a simple ride, but in that moment it had meant much more. For him it had meant trust, compassion, and a reminder that someone could still see him as a person, not just a name on a list or a forgotten face in the crowd. The car moved cautiously through the misty streets. Aisha stayed alert, scanning the shadows and listening to every sound. Every distant footstep, every rustle of leaves made her heart skip. She could see the worry in Mr. Thompson's eyes, but he remained calm enough to guide her. "We need to find a safer place," he said finally. "Somewhere we can regroup, somewhere they won't find us so easily." Aisha nodded. "Do you know where that is?" He hesitated, then pointed to a nearby street. "There's a small parking lot a few blocks from here. It's quiet and hidden. We can stop there, plan our next move." She followed his directions, keeping the car slow and steady. The streets were mostly empty, the occasional flicker of a streetlight casting long shadows across the wet asphalt. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, the adrenaline mixing with a strange sense of purpose. When they reached the parking lot, it was as he had described, small, secluded, and dimly lit. Aisha parked carefully near the edge, making sure the car was as hidden as possible. The mist hung low, giving the lot an eerie calm, almost like the world had paused for a moment. Mr. Thompson exhaled slowly, his shoulders sagging as he leaned back. "We have a little time," he said quietly, "but we need to be smart. They know me. They know who I am. And if they realize you were involved, it could put you in danger too." Aisha nodded, feeling the weight of his words. She hadn't expected to be part of someone else's past, but now she understood. Sometimes kindness came with responsibility, and she had chosen to act. She had to see it through. "I'll do whatever I can," she said softly. "Just tell me what to do." He gave her a faint smile, a mixture of gratitude and relief. "You've already done more than you know. Just staying calm, staying with me, that's helping more than you realize." For a few moments they sat in silence, the hum of the engine filling the small space. The quiet was almost a comfort, giving them both a moment to breathe and gather their thoughts. Aisha glanced at him again. Despite everything, the loneliness, the danger, the weight of his past, he had a kind of quiet strength. He wasn't the helpless old man she had first seen in the rain. He was someone who had survived a lifetime of challenges and was still fighting, still moving forward. Suddenly he spoke again, his voice low and serious. "I need to go back to the building for a moment." Aisha's heart skipped a beat. "Back? Are you sure that's safe?" He nodded, "And it's necessary. There's something I need to retrieve." Something important. I can't leave it behind. But I need you to stay here. Stay in the car. Don't get out. Not for any reason. She swallowed hard but nodded. Okay, I'll stay here. Be careful. He gave her a reassuring glance and stepped out of the car, moving cautiously toward the old building. Aisha watched, her fingers gripping the wheel, ready to react if anything went wrong. She could see the tension in his movements, the careful way he approached, but there was also determination. He wasn't just surviving, he was taking control of the situation. Minutes passed, each one stretching longer than the last. Aisha's mind raced with possibilities, imagining every scenario, every danger that could arise. She felt helpless in the moment, but she knew that her presence mattered. She was part of this now, a silent witness and support, ready to act if needed. Finally, he returned, holding a small bag tightly against his chest. His face was pale, but there was a small, triumphant smile. Got it, he said quietly, sliding back into the car. We can move now. We have what we need to stay safe for the night. Aisha exhaled, relief washing over her. That looked risky, she said softly. I was worried, he nodded. It was. But sometimes you have to face the risk to protect yourself, to protect the life you're trying to rebuild. She looked at him, admiration mixing with concern. You've been through so much. I can't imagine living like that, constantly facing danger and loneliness. He shrugged slightly. You survive. You adapt. You learn to be careful, to trust when it matters, and to act when you have to. And sometimes someone like you comes along and reminds you that not everyone is out to hurt you. Aisha felt a warmth in her chest at his words. She had only offered a ride, but it had become so much more. She realized that even small acts of kindness could have profound effects, reaching farther than anyone could anticipate. They drove slowly away from the building, the city streets now quiet and almost empty. Mr. Thompson kept glancing at the rearview mirror, making sure they weren't being followed. Aisha's heart raced, but she kept her focus on the road, trusting his guidance. We need to find somewhere safe to stay for the night, he said finally. Somewhere hidden where we can regroup and plan the next steps. The men outside. They won't bother us tonight, but we can't take chances. Aisha nodded. Do you know a place? He hesitated, then nodded. There's a small shelter a few blocks from here. Not fancy, but it's safe. We can stay there until daylight, then figure out what to do next. The drive to the shelter was tense but uneventful. The streets were wet and misty, the occasional flicker of a street lamp casting long shadows. Every corner seemed like it could hold danger, and Aisha's nerves were on edge. But she stayed calm, keeping her eyes on the road and her mind alert. When they finally reached the shelter, it was quiet and unassuming. A small sign flickered weakly, and the entrance was tucked away behind a narrow alley. Aisha parked the car carefully, and Mr. Thompson gave her a faint smile. We're safe. For now, he said quietly. Inside, the shelter was modest but warm. There were a few other people, quietly going about their business, and the staff welcomed them without question. Aisha felt a sense of relief, knowing they had reached a place where danger could not reach them tonight. They found a small corner to settle in, and Mr. Thompson sat down, breathing deeply. Thank you, he said again. You didn't have to do this. But you stayed. You helped me when no one else would. Aisha smiled softly. I didn't do anything extraordinary, I just saw someone who needed help and tried to be there. That's all. He shook his head. It's more than that. It's rare. And it means more than I can say. They sat in silence for a moment, the shelter's quiet hum a comforting background to their thoughts. Aisha realized that tonight had changed her. She had expected a simple ride, but she had found herself part of someone else's life, someone's survival, someone's hope. And that was powerful. As the night wore on, they shared quiet conversation, stories of the past, and moments of reflection. Mr. Thompson spoke sparingly about his life, revealing just enough for Aisha to understand his struggles and his resilience. She listened, offering encouragement and kindness, knowing that sometimes listening was the greatest help anyone could give. For Aisha, the night had become a lesson in courage, trust, and the unexpected ways human lives could intersect. She had come out to help a stranger in the rain, and had found herself part of a story far bigger than she could have imagined. And she realized that sometimes being human meant taking risks, offering kindness, and standing by someone even when the world felt uncertain and dangerous. And as they settled in the small corner of the shelter, Aisha knew that this was not the end. The night had tested them, revealed truths, and shown them both that trust and courage could still exist in a world filled with hardship. The journey was far from over, but for now they were safe together, and ready to face whatever came next. Morning light slowly filtered through the small windows of the shelter, casting soft beams across the quiet room. The mist from the night had lifted, leaving the streets outside clear and calm. Aisha sat in the corner, sipping a cup of coffee she had bought from a small vending machine nearby, while Mr. Thompson sat beside her, quietly observing the world waking up outside. For the first time in hours, the tension that had gripped the night seemed to ease. The danger from the old building and the men who had haunted him the night before felt distant now, replaced by a quiet sense of relief. But there was more than relief in the air. There was a feeling of possibility. For both of them, the night had changed something fundamental. Aisha looked at Mr. Thompson, noticing the subtle signs of exhaustion in his posture. The lines on his face seemed deeper, but there was also a softness now, a quiet peace that had been absent for years. She realized how heavy the burdens of loneliness, fear, and past mistakes could be, and how rare it was to find someone willing to help without expecting anything in return. "Did you sleep at all?" she asked gently. He shook his head slightly. "Not really, my mind. It doesn't rest easily anymore. But being here with you, knowing I'm safe, that helps more than I can explain." Aisha nodded, understanding completely. Some fears didn't disappear with sleep. Some pasts didn't fade overnight. But knowing someone was there, someone who cared, could make even the heaviest burdens feel lighter. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the quiet hum of the shelter. Occasionally other people passed by, but most were wrapped in their own thoughts, their own lives. Aisha realized that every person here had a story, a struggle, a past that shaped them, and in that realization she felt connected, not just to Mr. Thompson, but to the world around her. Finally, he spoke again, his voice thoughtful. "I never imagined someone like you would show up in my life. Someone who cares, who doesn't judge, who just helps. It's been a long time since I felt that." Aisha smiled softly. "Sometimes we don't realize how much our actions affect others. I only offered a ride, but it mattered to you, and that matters to me too." He looked at her with a mixture of gratitude and curiosity. "You could have walked away. Anyone else might have. Most people do. But you stayed. That's rare. It makes me wonder if I've been too closed off all these years." Aisha felt a lump in her throat. She didn't want to get too emotional, but the honesty in his voice was powerful. It wasn't just gratitude. It was recognition, a bridge being built between two human beings who had found each other at the right time. They spent the morning quietly talking, sharing fragments of their lives. Mr. Thompson spoke of his younger days, of mistakes he had made, of people he had lost and wronged. He didn't dwell on anger or guilt, but acknowledged them, a kind of quiet acceptance that was humbling to witness. Aisha listened, offering gentle encouragement, small smiles, and simple words of understanding. In turn, Aisha shared a little about her own life, not as a confession, but as a way of connecting. She spoke of her work, her challenges, and her small joys. She didn't hide her own struggles, but she didn't dwell on them either. She realized that in this quiet exchange they were finding something rare: trust. After a while, Mr. Thompson leaned back, closing his eyes for a brief moment. "I think I needed this," he said quietly. "Not just your help, but your presence. To feel human again. To remember that life isn't only hardship and regret. There's kindness too." Aisha nodded, understanding fully. She realized that her small act had done more than offer temporary safety. It had reminded him that even after years of solitude and mistakes, there was still a place in the world where he could belong, where he could feel valued. The hours passed, and the shelter gradually filled with the normal rhythm of life. People came and went, exchanging greetings, helping each other in small ways. Aisha watched, noticing how small gestures, like sharing a blanket, offering a smile, or simply listening, could make a difference. She realized that her own actions, though small, were part of this same human thread. By late morning, Mr. Thompson felt ready to leave the shelter. "I think I can face the day now," he said quietly. "Thanks to you, I feel capable again, stronger than I have in a long time." Aisha smiled warmly. "I'm glad. I'm happy to help. But remember, this isn't just about me. You've survived a lot and you've faced danger. You've been stronger than you realize.